Coach, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I want to go back like right away. Take me to March of last year. It seems like so long ago. But when you were getting over last season and you're trying to assess what you need to double down in and what you need to change, what was that process like for you?
Well, the process was simple. I wanted to reach out to my mentor, Leonard Hamilton, who had been through an 0-18 season of his own at the University of Miami. But I wanted to just dive right into my emergency management skills and develop a new um, insert to our program. I wanted to reset everything and just start back at square one as if I just got hired. And that's what I took from it. I just got hired in March. That's the mentality. We had a new AD at the time that took over, Laird Veach, and I kind of knew the transition um, leading into the summer. So we were without Desiree Reed Francois, our AD, but I still had the pat on the back from our president Moon Choi, our board of curators, and we were in transition at that point. And I wanted to prepare the staff best way possible and make sure we identified the right young man in the portal to come on board. I hired Rob Summers as our offensive coordinator. We brought him in. Obviously, he worked with us at Cleveland State and he was at Miami of Ohio. And those are the things that we kind of attacked first. And I met with our sports psychologist, Dr. Joe Carr, and I just consistently met with my professional development coach, John, and he John Oliver from JKO Solutions, and he did a great job with us and with me. So I'm thankful for that whole crew.
All right. Well, Doc Carr is one of my favorites, so I'm going to come back to him in a little bit. But I want to ask you about this, and maybe this answer will include Doc Carr. We know how stressful this profession can be. We've
Yeah.
seen a lot of people, their individual health suffers when they go through a rough season. What did you do to take care of yourself personally in that time?
Well, I'm a vegan first and foremost, so I've been eating a certain way, and that came from Leonard Hamilton. We would go on a fast every January and go into a Daniel's diet from January 1 all the way till we lost our last game of the season. And I just kept year by year going a little bit longer. I would go into the summer, I would go into July 4th, I would go into the fall. Then one year I decided to go all the way through a whole year. And I said, you know what? My body feels great. I demand from our staff, in addition to myself, and it starts from Coach Ham, we have consistent doctor's appointments. Our players get physicals, but I demand our coaches to get physicals, and it starts with me. That physical is something that discovered and allowed our assistant coach Dickie Nutt, who was diagnosed with cancer, to find a small lump on his leg. And what I'm proud about is our team of doctors, our trainer, not only taking care of our student athletes, but making sure our staff moves forward and taking care of their health. Because what's important for a group is group health, group camaraderie, and I truly believe that was something in discovering and helping discover Coach Nutt, who's on the other side of his cancer treatments.
Wow, that is an incredible story because we hear so often, and I'm sure you've seen more times than you can remember, peers of yours who have let their physical health deteriorate because they get so consumed with the
Yeah.
wins and losses. But what a shining example that is. Wow. If
I
I
don't
could
drink. I
turn,
don't drink, Adam. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink pop or soda. I don't. For me, I've always been conscious of what I eat. One of my
yep.
favorite restaurants here is Nourish. I eat a lot of vegetables. I go to the farmers market, right? I have a garden at home where we plant vegetables and things like that. So for me, now I'm the only vegan in my house. I can tell you that. But for the most part, the family, they eat how they eat. Kids eat how they
Right.
eat. I know that this is a high stress job, and I wanted to make sure my health does not deteriorate, especially during the stress. And for most young coaches, assistants who want to be head coaches, you can have stress after wins and after losses in leadership positions. This is a tough
Mm,
job and it's hard on the body. And I increase my activity from working out and different things like that.
mm. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you about your players now, and
Yeah,
in particular, Mark Mitchell and Tamar Bates. These are two guys that had huge expectations coming out of high school, go to different programs, don't necessarily get off to the start that others have anticipated for them. They come to you and they are able to totally turn the page. What is it about you or your program that has allowed these players and others to find this revitalization of sorts?
I think my personality. I truly believe as we've transitioned into this new phase that I've been prepared over a period of time to handle COVID, to handle the transfer portal. When I took over Cleveland State, we had two or three players on the roster. We had to develop kids. But in addition to that, when I took over Missouri, we had Kobe Brown, Ronnie DeGray, and Caleb Brown on the roster. We had to build a whole new roster, and we had to turn that around quick, right? And we were able to get results. So for me, player development is essential. And those two players specifically, we just honed in on their player development. How can we get them better? How can we get them better mentally, physically, and emotionally? And we dotted every I, crossed every T. We prescribed them an individual player development plan, and we stuck to it. And their parents allowed us to stick to it. Yes, was it uncomfortable? Absolutely. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. There is nobody that grows without growing pains. So we wanted them to make sure they understood the process, the progress, but also my mentality behind it. We wanted them to attack every day with the utmost confidence and obviously move forward with their individual development. And that's what happened.
I want to dig a little deeper on that if you'll allow me. Mark Mitchell, I
Absolutely.
remember being someone who was, like most kids in high school,
Yeah.
didn't want to be told he was a center. Was very, shall we say, just aware of positional labels.
Yeah.
And regardless of what position he's saying he plays now, there are times when you surround him with four shooters on the floor. He's averaging 20 points per game in your last five. And how did you convince him specifically that it's not about what position you're doing, it's about how you're being utilized?
Well, I think it comes twofold. It comes from peers and it comes from a coach. And from the peer standpoint, he saw Tamar Bates become a 40, 50, 90 guy in every week except the last week of his junior year. And he was just a couple percentage points away from that from 3 point land. He see Tamar Bates doing that exact same thing now. So from a peer perspective, is one thing. From my perspective, I never looked at him as a center. I never looked at him as a one-dimensional player. I looked at he no different than I looked at Kobe Brown from a versatility standpoint. These guys can play 1 through 5 with the ball in their hands. They facilitators. The analytics says that their usage rates are skyrocketing and through the roof. He is a multi-dimensional talent defensively, and he can do the same offensively. Now, where other people kind of throw jabs is shooting ability. Well, I want him to be confident shooting the ball. And then we focus on the next phase of that going in. Now, you can only make shots that you feel you can make. If there's any second guessing in that, Mark Mitchell, and I will have a problem. But I want this kid to play gap-free basketball with his instincts, and that's the growth you see because he's able to bring the ball up the court. We put him in ball screen situations where he set ball screens and also receive them, and he's able to stretch the court. And he hit one of the biggest shots in that Kansas game, corner three, and it was nothing but net. So for us, we see it every day, and he's getting back to his norm.
The progression of the 3-point shooting in particular is nothing new for you guys. Kobe Brown was a career 25% 3-point shooter.
Yeah,
Your first year at Mizzou, he was 45.5%,
yeah,
while taking over 3 attempts per game. Caleb Grill this year, coming off the bench, he's your leading scorer, 44% from three. He was around 34% career shooter coming into the year. So what is it again about you personally, about your system that allows these shooters to improve so dramatically in that specific area?
Well, first of all, I want every recruit to hear what you just said. We improve guys. No matter if you're a 30% shooter or not, you're gonna get better if you come to Missouri and allow me and my staff to love on you a little bit, right? That was my commercial. The second part of that is this. I think our player development plan and consistency allows us to take away from that because guys are playing less minutes and they're becoming more efficient. That is the part that you have to understand in this scheme of things. Their player efficiency rating is through the roof. There's no empty possessions on offense and defense. They're learning a pro style defensive rotation and recognition. They're learning how to switch 1 through 5. They're learning different play calls. They're learning different reads offensively. And now doing it repetitively allows confidence to grow. But our plan and how we practice, we don't concentrate on block planning. We concentrate on the randomization of doing things, and it does not look pretty in practice. We're not doing things where I'm satisfied with, oh, it looks a certain way. We're doing things to cognitive develop our players and push them in a way that we needed to push them. I've worked with basketball immersion. They've done a great job with us. I'm just excited with the group of people that I've collaborated with throughout my career, and I have no insecurities to admit who I work with, right? Those things are tremendous assets to me. And we outsource a lot of psychological, psychology, professional development for the staff because the team doesn't get better unless the staff get better. And we build out player development things that allows us to execute. There's a lot of part method teaching, but a lot of randomization and non-block training segments that we do in our practices that's more game related than anything else.
I love that. I love that because it's fairly contrarian to all the coaches out there who want to have the pretty clean practice just when people come in. Coach, I don't
Hey, as
remember.
as 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 a lot of people say, I don't believe in a three-man weave.
Amen. Yeah, I'm sending this to my kids' coaches right now. I want to ask you about that. I don't know if you remember. It was about 2 years ago in April of '03. You and I sat together at a game. I think it was an Adidas event. I can't even remember who I was supposed to be watching because I know I didn't see any of the game because we just ended up talking about stuff like this. One of the
Yeah,
things that we talked about was shooting strikes. Can
yeah.
you tell me like the baseball analogy or terminology that goes into that concept?
So the concept, obviously, our staff does a great job. Our associate head coach, Charlton Young, does a great job of using terms that allows learning to take place. And, for me, he's been a definite asset to our staff. But you look at Ryan Sharbaugh, Matt Klein, Rob Summers, Kyle Smith Peters, you look at David Nutt, you look at David Carter. These guys are all head coaches in my eyes, and they deserve a shot and an opportunity. So for me, I learned from football, baseball, soccer. I learned from every possible sport, right? I had an opportunity to get to know Mike Martin Sr., the all-time winningest baseball coach in college baseball history, right? While at Florida State. And we were talking and understand Mike Martin Sr. started his career as a basketball coach, okay?
Mm.
Here he is now, baseball coach, Hall of Famer. God rest in peace. But I learned so much from him. And throwing strikes is simple. You want to be able to throw strikes in baseball, not only around, as a pitcher, but from second, third base, shortstop, to first base or second base, right? From the outfield to the cutoff man. You want to throw strikes in those environments, and that allows your efficiency and things to run a little bit smoother. So for basketball, I coined those terms of throwing strikes. Charlton Young coined those terms of throwing strikes to shooters, and not only to shooters, but to drivers. Not only to that, but in transition. You got to be able to throw efficient passes within cylinders of people. And they also have to do a great job, no different than a catcher, of selling that and getting behind the ball. No different than a shortstop or second baseman gets behind a ground ball, you got to be able to get and operate within your box and now be able to make the next play. For a shooter, we want them to shoot strikes, but they're just as responsible of a strike being thrown than the thrower or the passer as they are the catcher catching it in their cylinder and their shot pockets.
And I have to think that has a lot to do with the shooting jumps we're seeing for your guys when they are shooting good passes. The
Yeah,
second
our
thing you
guys
did,
are definitely we demand it in practice, and Charlton Young is one of our shooting coaches, and he does a great job in the individual footwork and plans. And I would tell everybody, there may be some videos out there of him actually doing it. It's something that every level can learn from, whether you're grassroots, elementary, high school, or even professional. Just cleaning up those details of shooting. Charlton Young is one of the best at teaching it.
the second thing you told me about, and this is what really got me in that conversation. This is when whatever, forgive me, whichever kid I was
I
supposed to be
know
watching
exactly
that.
what you're gonna say.
You handed me your phone
Yeah,
and you're like, this is how we watch film. And I was,
yeah,
and I was apprehensive. You're like, go ahead, you can look. And it was a text thread with you and a player of
yeah,
just you sending him clips over text. And this
yeah.
is so my question to you is how you have modernized, whether it's your film work or just your overall communication ability with your team to make it the way in which young adults in this day and age can absorb it best.
Well, I'll say this to you. This generation of young people and adults, the growth of electronics has definitely increased our level of communication, but it also has separated us from communicating with each other. It put certain things on islands, but how do you reconnect with it and reconnect and build that bridge amongst the people and communication? You actually have to use those technologies to your advantage. And for us and for me, sometimes for me, I'll send kids, something in their DMs, whether it's on the platforms of X or even Instagram, but also text messaging and having film sessions that way, just because I'll talk and narrate through it while I'm watching film, and I may want to, call them or tell them, but sometimes that time is crunched. Sometimes kids have idle time laying in bed, right? And I want them to be able to, the things that we complain about, I want them to be able to say that this is the platform that my head coach met us on. I have no problem changing with the times without a doubt, because what I've seen is my relationship with my student athletes grow because I'm not afraid to meet them on their turf from time to time. And their turf right now is social media, their turf is cell phones. And what I'm not going to have it be a distraction. I'm gonna have it be an attraction, something that keeps us together and something that grows.
And these were very legitimate coaching points that you would see in
Yeah.
the actual film session. I thought it was fascinating. Coach, I've got two more quick ones. I want to be real cognizant of your time here. You mentioned Coach Ham. I know he's been a mentor to you. I've heard you talk about the impact your high school coach played in developing you as well. But you were asked recently about influences on your offensive system, and you mentioned Pete Carrill and John Beeline. And that
Yeah.
struck me because so often you hear coaches when they are accused of running any kind of Princeton offense, it gets used against them because there's this perception that they play slow. You guys play fast, and you
Yeah.
play at least 9, usually more guys than that every single night. How did you
Yeah.
merge that with tenets of those offensive systems?
Well, I look at it from this perspective, and I appreciate you asking. When I kind of visualize myself as a coach, I knew John Beeline's system was something that I would be curious about because of what his success rate was, but also the things he did defensively and offensively. My offensive coordinator played for John Beeline, played for him at West Virginia. He was on a team with an unbelievable coach who's now at the Boston Celtics, right? Missoula. He was a center, Rob Summers. He'll be an unbelievable head coach, and he'll get his opportunity soon enough. So I got that perspective, but I also got the perspective of Pete Corral, one of my good friends, Tavares Hardy. he coached at Northwestern under Bill Carmody. And Bill Carmody
Hmm.
is the direct person who took over for Pete Corral over at Princeton. And I pick his brain. I do not allow Tavares Hardy to ask me a question without, or hang up the phone or get off a Zoom without me asking him something about the Princeton offense and what he's been able to do when he was the head coach at Loyola, Maryland,
Hmm.
and also throughout his playing career when he played for Bill Carmody. So for me, that perspective is something that I've always looked at. That's been behind our success, my success at Cleveland State, and also here at Missouri. Now you add the notion of what I've learned along the way from my mentors, my high school coach, right? That's an influence in our transition attack. George Stanton, obviously somebody that's a Hall of Famer in Illinois high school basketball. He coached at Simeon and then took over the Whitney Young program, where I went to high school at. Now you look at, fast forward, those that I worked for. I worked for David Carter. I worked for Tom Crean. I worked for Ricardo Patton. And I worked for Leonard Hamilton. All great leaders with great philosophies and systems. And now I'm able to put things in a melting pot and put my personality on it, on how I want to go about teaching and coaching and influencing the game of basketball. So for me, those things are what it is, and that's where it comes from.
Last question, as promised. Dr.
Yeah,
Joe Carr, Doc Carr, for
yeah,
those who know him well. It was about 5 years ago. I had him on a different podcast because I
yeah,
just had coaches, friends of mine say, you got to talk to this guy. He's worked with
yeah.
everybody. Why has he been so important to what you have been able to build and rebuild at Mizzou?
Well, I'll say this. Dr. Carr has been in my life since I was 18 years old. Ben Braun hired Dr. Joe Carr at the University of California. And at that time, I was a leader, a captain. And I told Dr. Carr at that point in time, because I saw myself grow as a captain and a leader, and I saw our team galvanize, and I saw our success. He was able to bridge the gaps of communication from coach to player, player to coach, and also teammate to teammate. And those are things that he taught and pushed and influenced. Now, at that point in time, I told this guy, I said, Dr. Carr, when I become a head coach, now I'm 18 and 19. When I become a head coach, I want you to work with my teams. So, fast forward, I get the head job at Cleveland State. I didn't tell my mom, I didn't tell my parents. I called Dr. Joe Carr to see if he remembered what he told an 18, 19-year-old young man. And obviously, he's been a mentor for me throughout that time and in between. He cleared his entire schedule. He said, when do you need me? And it's something that I've done even when I got to Missouri. Got the job at Missouri. He was one of the first calls that I made. He cleared his entire schedule. And he's consulting with us. He consults with me on life, right? But also from a sports psychologist standpoint, how do you go through an 0-19 season and be prepared to move forward without firing a staff member, without blaming someone else? You got to have the right people to talk to. Dr. Joe Carr was that for me. Unbelievable person, got me through things and also allowed me to understand how to get out of the way of myself so I can properly influence the young people that I'm pouring into, and obviously how to galvanize a staff and get a staff together, because all this is not possible without the right staff. So he's allowed me and helped me identify the staff members that I have, and if they are the personalities that I want to work with, but also that can message correctly throughout our program. And John Oliver, JKO Solutions, has done a great job with me as well. When I was an assistant coach, how did I get better? How did I use Florida State as my classroom with Mike Martin Sr.'s relationship, Jimbo Fisher's relationship, Sue Summerall's relationship, all those coaches on our staff or at Florida State at the time, I was an assistant coach going to their practices. And I was using the environment as my classroom to see leaders lead. And I was fortunate enough to see some coaches win national championships. And I was in the front row, no different than I was in a classroom trying to earn another degree.
Coach, you have been exceptionally generous with your time. I know you were in the thick of things here. Mizzou fans are going to love this, but I think coaches all across the country, all across the world, and in different sports are going to love this as well. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, MIZ.